Welcome to Threshold Stories, crossing thresholds one story at a time. I'm your host, Jeff Gora.
Hey everybody, time for another Threshold Story. This is episode 124. Today we got Steve Eles coming to us from Boulder, Colorado. Steve, how are you?
Good. How you doing, Jeff?
Hey, good. So thanks for coming on. So I have known Steve for a few years. Steve is an administrator at UC Boulder. So he is a couple of time zones behind me here, and we are recording this the day after Memorial Day. He just told me in our pre-game, if you want to call it that, about the Boulder. Steve, this has nothing to do with the podcast. It's certainly not on the questions I sent you in advance. Tell everybody what the heck is the Boulder. I think that's interesting.
Yeah. So the Boulder is a 10K. Runner's World calls it America's greatest 10K, and there's 50,000 people that do the Boulder. So you got to compare it to, New York City is the largest marathon in the United States, and it's got 50,000 people. So the Boulder has 50,000 people doing this 10K, and all kinds of different. It's something for everyone. So there's fast elite people up front, and then to give you perspective, the race, the starts run for 3 hours. Like the first wave goes off at 6:55 a.m. and the last wave goes off at 10. So they have 50,000, 1,000 wave starts.
That for perspective's sake, I just can't wrap my head around something like that. I mean, I did the New York City Marathon, and I'm dating myself here. 1992, I did the New York City Marathon, and I remember the gun going off. David Dinkins was the mayor. Remember the gun going off, and I was absolutely stationary for about a half an hour because of the accordion effect, because they didn't do wave starts. They had the elites up front, and then the next, and the next, and the next. By the time they got down to us, that much time had expired. So it's pretty interesting. So Steve is a 42-year-old athlete, and Steve was announced to be the male Masters Duathlete of the Year for USA Triathlon, which is one heck of an accomplishment. Since I'd known Steve from going to different world championships with him, I decided to see if he would be interested in coming on the show and doing a podcast with him. And he said yes. So wonderful, and he's here. So I know a lot of you guys are listening and you want to know more, so I'm going to kind of just jump into it. So Steve, let's jump right into your background. Talk about your entryway in the sport.
So I was born in Northern Ontario. I grew up in a town called Sudbury, Ontario, which is about 4 hours or about 250 miles north of Toronto. So I was born and raised there. I spent my first 18 years there. I went to high school there. I moved to Michigan when I was 18 and have lived in the United States since then.
You moved down south to Michigan.
Yeah. But growing up, anyone that grows up in Canada, hockey is the pastime for the country. So that's what I grew up as a youth doing. Everyone, it's kind of neat. I mean, Sudbury's not a small town. It's about 160,000 people. So every neighborhood has an outdoor hockey rink, and that's what you grew up as a kid doing. I mean, every evening, every weekend. I mean, I am talking, you're spending 5-6 hours out there on the Saturday, on the Sunday, skating, playing pickup hockey. That's what you did. That's what all your friends did. So I grew up playing hockey, but my parents were avid Nordic skiers or cross-country skiers. So I started skating when I was 2, and I started cross-country skiing when I was 2. So I got into sport really early. My parents got me into, their hobbies or their interests. And so the 3 main things I did as a youth were I played hockey, and I spent way too much time playing hockey, and I did a lot of cross-country skiing with my family. And I played soccer. So those were the 3 things that I definitely, spent most of my youth doing.
So do you still find yourself compelled to follow the NHL and stuff like that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, see what's going on, who's going into the finals.
Yeah, I've been a suffering Toronto Maple Leafs fan my entire life, and they haven't won the Stanley Cup since 1967. Yeah. So the struggle
Darth Vader, the Darth Vader of all things hockey. But so it's interesting. This year we got 2 teams playing in the month of June for Stanley Cup playoffs, and each team will probably host a game when the city they're in is over 100 degrees.
Yeah, we got Las Vegas and Florida Panthers, and Florida Panthers are in Sunrise, Florida, which is basically, Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. And yeah, it's cool though where I live. I mean, I am about half an hour from downtown Denver. And so I can go to some Colorado Avalanche games, and I went to a couple this year. So
Awesome.
that was fun.
So let's fast forward a bit. So you go from the Great White North to the deep south of Michigan, and you begin life as a U.S. resident, right? So walk us through how your sport evolved, and you're probably going to have a conversation about college and stuff at this point too. Take us from that leaving departure of Canada to your early part of your life in USA.
So I spent my formative years doing those three sports I mentioned, the hockey, soccer, and cross country skiing. In high school, I ran cross country. I cross country skied, and I ran track and field. And I skied at a high level, cross country skiing. I skied for Laurentian Nordic. The club I skied for has put from my hometown, we've had 3 people ski in the Olympics. My best friend growing up has skied in 4 Winter Olympics. So I was around a lot of good athletes growing up. And I was trying to decide when I was coming out of high school if I was going to ski in college or run. And I decided the running path. So I ended up running cross country and doing track and field.
Where was that at? What university?
I went to Lake Superior State University in Michigan, and ran there for 4 years. And really enjoyed that experience. So I came out of high school ranked quite well in both skiing and running. I was ranked 6th in the country in the steeplechase, and had some success nationally in cross country running as well. So, carried that over, got an athletic scholarship, and ran at Lake Superior State University for 4 years in Michigan. I made the NCAA championships in the steeplechase. Won the GLIAC Conference Championship in the steeplechase. Had some success in other events, the mile, 3K, 5K, and ran cross country.
Well, for the people who are listening right here, let's get some of your numbers out of you. And I know you're a relatively humble guy, but what's your best mile?
So in college indoors, we run the true mile, the 1,609 meters. So I ran 4:14 for the true mile indoors. I ran 3:55 for the metric miles outdoor. The metric mile is the 1,500 meters. So I ran 3:55.
Sure.
Ran 3:55 for that in college. For the 3K, I ran 8:32, which is approaching down close to a 9-minute 2 mile, but not quite there. I ran 14:48 for the 5K. And then I ran 9:06 for the steeplechase.
That's fantastic. So talk just for perspective's sake, even at your age. So how did you do in the Boulder Bowl?
So the Boulder, I ran.
Granted, you're at 6,000 feet of elevation. No, by the way, it's not flat, but still, perspective's sake.
Yeah, so I ran decent. I was hoping to break 35 minutes because of the altitude. I ran 35:33, which is decent for, I guess, my age. The down.
What's that, like a 5:50? Is that your pace for that? Is that right?
I averaged 5:39.
5:39. Okay.
Yeah. So, and they say it's about 12 seconds a mile slower in Boulder at our elevation. If you get higher, like Alamosa or Steamboat Springs, they're over 7,000 feet. It's going to be even more substantial. But
yeah, that's a running tax, an elevation tax.
Yeah. So
I don't know their numbers.
But so to give you a perspective, we raced together in Spain just a month ago, and I opened up my first 10K in 34:58 in Spain before jumping on and doing a 40K bike and then the 5K run. So it's all perspective. I worked hard, but I hope to break 35 minutes, but altitude does slow you down. It slows everyone down. The winner was 31:0 something. So, in an elite wave, people are not breaking 30 minutes at altitude. It's hard to run. It's hard to run fast over 5,000 feet. So
sure. So let's talk about the transition to duathlon. So your background you just described didn't really work. You had the running background, and that's traditional. A lot of people who enter multi-sport races come out of running. What was your migration to endurance sport like?
So I graduated from college in 2003, which kind of dates me and makes me the 43 years old I am. But so I graduated in 2003 from college, and I wanted to kind of keep running for a while. And so in 2004, I ran in the Olympic trials. So I actually graduated, when I graduated in 2003, I moved to Ohio for 2 years, and I coached at Tiffin University in Ohio. And I coached cross country and track and field. Since I was working for the university, I got to do my master's degree for free, which was a tremendous benefit from that time I spent there. But I got to continue to be around good collegiate athletes, coach, run with them, and I ran in 2004 Olympic trials, and then I kept running. I ran my first marathon in 2005. And
so walk people through what it means when you said I did the Olympic trials. Tell people what that means. A lot of people don't know what you just said.
So I mean, it's a challenge to qualify in its own. I mean, the Olympic trials are pretty challenging to get into on their own. But I ran the steeplechase, which kind of was my specialty in outdoor track and field. And I had some success in that in college. Like I said, I ran in the NCAA championships in that, and then I ran in the 2000 and 2004 Olympic trials in that event.
So back people into what is a steeplechase, and I know this might seem simplistic, but some people don't know.
So the steeplechase is a 3,000 meter race. And for people that haven't seen it, they might have seen some equestrian or horse jumping on TV, and those black and white barriers.
That's exactly where I'm going with this. Correct.
Those black and white barriers you see the horses going over. They put those out around the track. There's 5 total a lap, so there's 4 that are normal, and then 1 that's a water pit. And so it's a 3,000 meter race, just shy of 2 miles, and they put 5 barriers out of the lap to slow you down. At a high level,
that was fun.
At a high level, it's actually pretty challenging because if you're in a tight pack, and some of these races I've ran in, I mean, you're talking the first person to the last person crossing the line could be 5 to 10 seconds. And that's a tight pack, and it's a tight packed entire race. So the challenge being, sometimes you don't see the barriers. You see people jumping to hurdle the barrier, and you're just hoping that they're timing it right, because you're going on faith that their timing's correct, because you can't see the barrier if there's a half dozen people in front of you. So you just go to hurdle when everyone else is hurdling. So I think the steeplechase, though, Jeff,
driving blind, if that's described like that.
The whole thing we're talking about is being able, we're talking multi-sport. And I think anyone that's done steeplechase in college, steeplechase is definitely not an event for everyone. Some people can really run a mile, 3K, 5K, 10K, but they can't steeple. It disrupts your rhythm, and you have to be able to run with some sort of adversity. And multi-sport is that. You have to be able to find your legs and run off the bike. And I do really well with that. And I think part of that is my background, being able to steeplechase. I can come off the bike and run right away. Sometimes people, it takes them a mile to get their legs out from under them before they can even feel like they're in a rhythm. So the steeplechase is going to disrupt your rhythm, just like multi-sport disrupts your rhythm. And, throwing the bike in the middle of 2 runs in the duathlon realm is definitely going to disrupt your rhythm. And so
that's fuel for you. That's this is where I'm going to thrive, the disruption in the middle.
Yeah. And that's something I've always had some success or luck with. So anyhow, if anyone's anyone listening in, if you have some collegiate experience in the steeplechase, try duathlon. You might find some success with it.
Well, let's jump from there. How did you jump from steeplechase to duathlon?
So I continued to run for several years post-collegiate. I was coaching. I coached, like I mentioned, in Ohio from 2003 to 2005. And then in 2005, I moved back to Michigan, went back to Lake Superior State, and I was the head coach at Lake Superior State for cross country and track and field from 2005 to 2004, no, 2012. So that span, and seven great years. But I was around collegiate athletes, and I ran with them. I mean, I continued to run at a high level through that time. As I started to approach my 30s, I could still run a low 15-minute 5K, but it was starting to get a little frustrating in a little ways, in terms of, like, as you get older, you can't run quite as fast. And I had, growing up, my ski coach, who, the club I mentioned that, had produced 3 Olympians, he was actually, he competed in Kona and the Ironman multiple times. So I was around someone that had this multi-sport background, and I always, like, aspired or thought like an Ironman was a cool thing. So in 2010, I kind of, had done a bunch of marathons, a bunch of running, and I was like, oh, I kind of want to try an Ironman. Like, I think it's like this bucket list challenge thing. So I kind of came up with this 3-year plan. So in 2010, I got into multi-sport and I started doing triathlons. So, like, I started swimming. I'd already been, running. I biked for fun, but I started doing some more serious biking, commuting, to work by bike, getting some more miles in. So in 2010, I kind of started the process. Did my first couple triathlons. I did a sprint in the Olympic just to kind of get my feet wet. In 2011, I did a sprint in the Olympic and a half Ironman, and continued that swimming process and getting into multi-sport. In 2012, I did my first Ironman. And
which one did you pick?
I did Ironman Wisconsin. I was living in Michigan. So Madison, Wisconsin was, fairly close drive. I think it was 8 hours away. And it, I had a good reputation. It's supposed to be fairly hard for the Midwest. They call it fairly hilly for the Midwest. But that's how I got into multi-sport, just the desire to do an Ironman. And so I did 3 Ironmans. I did one in 2012, one in 2013, and one in 2014. And the one I did in 2014 was Ironman Canada, and that was in Whistler. And the venue and the scenery was beautiful. The bike course was just so challenging. It had over 7,000 vertical feet of climbing on it. And the run off the bike, while that's normally my strength, you make anyone climb 7,000 feet, I don't care how good of a runner you are, your legs are shot. And so the marathon was a long, hard run off that. And I questioned whether I wanted to continue doing Ironmans at that point. But since I had been doing triathlons, and I had done 3 year in 2011, 2012, I ended up, getting your national ranking and your points and whatever. And I had qualified for the national championships in triathlon. So I went to my first national championship in Milwaukee in 2014 in Olympic, for the Olympic distance triathlon. And I, to be honest, Jeff, had never heard of United States Triathlon prior to that. And I'm going to tell you that even though I'm in this world and pretty ingrained in it now, there's a lot of people that just live in the Ironman branded world. Like, they just do Ironman branded races. Right. Their goal is to get to Kona. They do the Ironman halves. They do the Ironman fulls. And those are the races. The
Ironman tattoos.
Yeah, but they might not do, they might do some local tune-up races, but like their primary focus is Ironman branded races. And that's cool. But there's a lot of people that don't even really know about United States Triathlon, the national rankings, all the benefits that United States Triathlon provides to the multi-sport community. And I'm going to be honest. I mean, I didn't know much about them, of anything, till 2014. I hadn't even really heard of them. And I was like, oh, there's this national championship in Milwaukee. I qualified based on my rankings or point scores from these other triathlons I've done. And so I dove in and did that in 2014. And then doing that event, Jeff, was my exposure to United States Triathlon. Find out their website, find out there's more than one national championship. There's a whole bunch throughout the year. And then that's how I landed in duathlon, to be honest, is I could swim, bike, and run, but running's my strongest of the suits. So the idea of being able to run twice and not have to swim, I was like, that sounds pretty cool. So I found out that there was this duathlon national championship. And so I did my first one in 2015, kind of my first year after being exposed to United States Triathlon at the 2014 Olympic distance national championship. And went to the national championships. It was in St. Paul, Minnesota, the first one I ever did in 2015. And I was kind of green.
I did that one as well.
I was kind of green. I mean, I could run in the front pack, but oh my gosh, I mean, I got I got handed to me on some of the climbs and whatnot on the bike, and I just went and I didn't know what to expect. I think I was like sixth place, the first one I ever did, first national championship, and
Not bad, by the way.
It was okay. Yeah, it was not bad. It was okay. But Jeff, I always do something, get some exposure, learn, and then like aim to try to improve. So I did that, and I was just like, I forced myself to go to the awards ceremony, watch, and I was like, I really want to come top 3 next year. So I went to the awards ceremony, forced myself to go watch and be like, I really want to be there next year. So I talked to a bunch of people, learned, figure things out. And then that was in 2015. 26. So I mean, I placed high enough. So I mean, my whole goal was to like just go to Spain for Worlds the next year. So that was in the Vilas. I went to the Worlds in 2016, and I was 20th, I think, at my first World Championship in the Vilas in the standard distance. But nationals were in Bend in 2016 and 2017, and I placed second, my second national championship in duathlon. So I figured things out. I could run, but I couldn't bike like I needed to. So
there's an adage that says one of the most applicable times when science actually gets used for the betterment of mankind is if there's a little bit of envy in front of it. And it sounds like you had that, your description of that. I'm going to the award ceremony. I want my envy to fly. I want it to flow. And voila, you applied science and here you are.
Well, people could bike better than I could. I could run with the field. I could run in the league group, but I couldn't bike in the league group. I was just like, I got to figure out what these guys are doing, and I want to be there. And so I talked to a bunch of people, figured out. I started biking in Michigan. There was Red Jacket Cycling Group. I started biking, doing a lot more group rides, getting uncomfortable, riding in a group, riding faster, getting pushed. And within a year's time, my skills on the bike improved significantly. Not just the speed, but bike handling skills, ability to ride in a group.
I like it.
Just getting uncomfortable. And I think that's why like going to the award ceremony is good. It's like you realize you're going to have to be uncomfortable. And we're talking a little bit before the podcast about like workouts and different stuff, but like,
which is where we're going next. Yeah.
But you have to get to that mindset of like, if you want to get somewhere beyond where you are currently, you're going to have to do something different, right? And for me, that's always been like, so in 2016 and 2017, both years I came second at nationals in Bend. And when I go from sixth my first year to second, that's amazing. You're ecstatic, right? You go, okay, I made the podium. That was my goal. The second year you come second again, you're like, okay, wasn't a fluke. I consistently can kind of get onto the podium. But then the next goal becomes, how do I win one of these, right? Like I came second 2 years in a row. How do I win one of these things? I know I can run with the leaders. I still got to get better on the bike. So in 2017, I actually was fortunate enough that I won my first national championship in standard distance. And that was in Greenville, South Carolina. So I won my first national championship in 2017. And then in 2018, I won the sprint distance in Greenville. So I flip-flopped. I was first in
one discipline.
I was first in the standard and second in the sprint in 18. And in 2019, I won the sprint and was second in the standard. So I finally figured out anyhow how to get to, get to the podium, then actually win a national championship.
Cool.
And
So let me bridge you from there kind of to the direction we want to go here. As I shared with you at the start of the podcast, I know one of the things the people who listen in on are going to want to learn a little bit is whatever you want to call the Steve Eles secret sauce, or what it looks like for you. And the way I rephrased this to you was, what's a week in your life like as a current athlete, somebody who's training? I know you're in your 40s, but go through, if you wouldn't mind, just do a Monday to Sunday, or if you want to start it on Sunday to Saturday, you pick it, but just kind of let people hear a monologue, if you will, about what it looks like for you. How long do you work out? Where do you go to work out?
Sure.
What do workouts look like?
So
there's a lot of people, by the way, a lot of people are going to replay this next section right now. So the more granularity you get, the better.
Sure. So when it comes to training, I did duathlon and triathlon all the way to 2019. I competed at World Championships in triathlon in Lausanne, Switzerland, in Gold Coast, Australia. And like at the world level in triathlon, I'd be like a top 30 is the best I could do. Like, I think I came 19th once in the sprint race, but typically I'd be in the high 20s, low 30s. In duathlon, I had more success, kind of regularly placing in the top 10. So I used to swim, bike, run, and cross country ski in terms of the training. When the pandemic happened, I stopped swimming. So I haven't done a triathlon since 2019. I've focused exclusively on duathlon since then. So in terms of training, I do three things. I run, I bike, and during the winter months, I cross country ski. So it really depends on the season. And I'm pretty consistent, and the one key I would say to my training is I'm very consistent. So
everybody, did you hear that? Hint.
So I don't go through these peaks and valleys. Some people really, put this like focus period in, but then they take like a big off season. I'm very consistent year round. And I joke around, like one of my friends that I try to help with his running and some of his training, like he's like, how do you do it? I'm like, I'm just consistent year round. And I say, like, I could break 240 in the marathon any day of the year, like, because I don't go through these peaks and valleys. So in terms of my running, and I'll say the one thing I always tell anyone that asks me about my running, Jeff, I still try to run at a high level. So in October, this coming fall, I'm going to be running in the World Masters Championships for the marathon. So I'm still running at a high level, especially since I turned 40 and I'm in the Masters category. In 2021, I was 14th overall master at the Boston Marathon. And in 2022, I was the 24th overall master at the Boston Marathon. And, the Boston Marathon's the granddaddy or pinnacle of marathoning. So in terms of running, to get to the question, I run a lot. And I run a lot.
What does that mean? People, that's the kind of, what does that mean when you say run a lot?
So I average 12 miles a day. I average 84-mile weeks.
Still.
And a lot, yes. And a lot of multi-sport people, that's going to boggle their mind. But I am bridging the gap between two sports. I do duathlon, but I also am still trying to run marathons at a high level, for a 40-plus-year-old. And if you can run under 240 for 40 plus, that's an elite. You're going to get an elite wave start in any marathon in the world if you're 40 plus. And I can do that. Like, I'm still consistently running 236.
I broke 3 hours exactly once. You were 20 minutes ahead of me any day of the year. Jeez Louise. I thought my 3 hour was I had a 2:58:59, and I thought that was epic. And you were an episode of Friends faster than me.
So
that's great.
I said I'm consistent. So I run every morning. I run before work every morning. And I live in Boulder, and I live near the reservoir. So anyone that knows the triathlon multi-sport world, I live on across the Dagnall Highway from the Boulder Reservoir. It's exactly 2 miles by trail from my house to the reservoir. So from every morning, I either hit the Lobo Trail, which is the Longmont Boulder Trails, the acronym for Lobo, and you're going to see who's who of running if you're out on there. I mean, everyone that lives in Boulder, whether it's Lori Flora, who won the last Olympics in triathlon, or Gwen, is Boulder resident now. She'll be out on there. You'll see Dathan Ritzenheim. I mean, the who's who of running is on the Lobo Trail or running around the Boulder Reservoir. It's 5+ miles around the reservoir, but it's 2 miles from my house to the reservoir, 5 miles around and 2 miles back. So, you're getting a nice 9-10 mile run. And if I go left to the reservoir, if I go right up towards on the Lobo.
So does weather play a role in your choice of running?
A little
You run in the snow?
Oh, no. I mean, yeah, absolutely. I run year round. I lived in northern Michigan for 20 years, Jeff. Living in Colorado is
Okay.
It's
I
nice
just want people to hear this. That's the point. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, I ran outside year round in Michigan. I would do quality stuff inside, but long runs, all the easy volume and no excuses. I mean, you get 6 inches of snow, go out and get your 10-mile run in, so the volume is consistent year round, regardless of weather. And running early morning does help in the summer months. It can get pretty hot in Colorado. I mean, we don't get the humidity like you do in North Carolina, Jeff, but there were 6 days where it went over 100 degrees in the Boulder, Denver area last August. So you want to get your run in early before it gets too hot.
That's the only choice here. Morning or you don't run. Yeah,
and it's just a routine. And I find not just the consistency, but routine. If you can get some sort of routine that works for you, I get up, I run, and then I jump online for work. I do have I'm very fortunate that I can work remotely. So I do spend a lot of my time in Colorado, but I also will and can travel. And like last year, when I had a very successful year in duathlon that, resulted in the Masters Duathlete of the Year, I had spent 6 weeks in Tucson, Arizona before coming over to Texas for nationals. And I could work from Texas or Tucson for 6 weeks.
Yeah, it was one of the first things I got to know about you when I met you. Remember that?
Yeah, so I do have the ability to work remotely and travel. And so that's something I do take advantage of. So I run in the morning, but like I said, I can work remotely. So that's what I do on the running side. I'm pretty consistent.
Let's go to the bike side.
Yeah, on the bike side, so I do count things more by miles than hours. And a small week for me is about 200 miles. So like that's what I consider a light week. I just ran the Boulder on Monday, and the week leading into the Boulder, I ran 72 miles and I biked 250 miles. And I would consider that a light week. Like I'm getting ready, kind of coming down to get ready to race kind of hard at the Boulder on Monday. A big week for me, I would consider 400 miles of net training, and that would be like 80 plus miles of running and 320 plus miles on the bike. So like trying to get both of those.
So the question that people are formulating answers to probably needs to be asked. What does that equate to with hours?
So it's relevant to the time of year, because indoors it's less time when you're on the Smart Trainer, because you can average 22 to 24 miles an hour on the Smart Trainer, and you can bang out 50 miles in a little over 2 hours. If I ride outside at 5,400 to 9,000 feet and I'm climbing, I can't average 24 miles an hour. So it fluctuates quite a bit depending on the time of year. I still do actually most of my hard riding nowadays. I've kind of started to do this inside.
That's a trend. That's not you. There's a lot of people are doing that.
A lot of people are doing that. I've kind of changed my mindset to doing that now. And so nowadays I'm doing, and even like in the winter, we do get a handful of days where I can ride outside in Boulder. We get some 60-degree days in January and February, maybe a handful a month. But I ride mainly gravel. So I'm out on a gravel bike, and that's the secret of Boulder that makes the cost of living so expensive. Is north of Boulder, it's old dirt roads. And everyone that lives in Boulder, no one wants to ride on the road. Everyone kind of gets spoiled rotten after living here for a year or two. No one wants to ride with cars because you don't have to. I mean, you ride these beautiful dirt roads. You can do 30 to 40 mile loops on rolling, you know, smooth, you know, dirt roads. And so I mainly ride gravel because that's all everyone does. Like, it's, if you want to ride in groups, you're going to ride gravel. If you want to climb and head west up into the mountains, into the Front Range, you're riding on gravel. So I mainly, if I'm riding outside, I'm on a gravel bike. And
that translates well when you switch to a road environment or a race environment.
yeah, and I mean, I think you need to have even better handling skills. I mean, there's a lot of open space in Boulder, so there's a lot of like farmland and whatnot, but there's a lot of cattle ranches, so there's a lot of cattle guards on a lot of these roads or trails. So you know, you're having to ride in groups, go over cattle guards. I think, I mean, riding a duathlon sprint race in a group setting is easy peasy on a road bike compared to, you know, group gravel ride with cattle guards and riding. And this is the hard thing to explain to people. Boulder is a hotbed. I mean, if you go to, there's this thing called Wednesday Morning Velo, and it starts in North Boulder. And if you show up, Jeff, there'll be 200 plus people at a 6:15 ride. I mean, recognize it's 6:15. How many people want to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning? 200 people will show up for a group ride. We have to break into 6 groups. So they do ABC for road, ABC for gravel. And they try to get like 30 people in a group. Like, there's that many people to ride with. It's insane. And then if I go to that's Wednesday morning. There's also a Wednesday evening group ride. There's a group ride every night of the week. It's just a matter of where it's from, what bike store, you know. Pearl Izumi is based here in Boulder. Ralpha, the bicycling clothing company, is here. They all host rides, Full Cycle. I do a lot of rides with them. So there's all these group rides. And I mean, you're rarely going to be out with less than 30 to 50 people in a group ride. It's just fantastic.
Well, that's great. That creates a whole valuable ambiance that I know I love. I much prefer riding with somebody else than riding solo.
Yeah.
Well, let's switch to nutrition, because there's people I know. When you and I were starting this, I feel like there was a nutrition side of this conversation that often gets duped when people interview athletes. They generally ditch the idea of what's your fuel look like. But you had something in common with my son, and I want to give you a forum to deep dive into that. Talk through what Steve Eles' nutrition strategy is.
So I've been a vegetarian for almost 10 years. And my ex-wife at this point was about 10 years ago, she went vegan. And, you know, well, at that time, my ex-wife and I have 2 daughters, and I went vegetarian, and kind of just, you know, she went vegan, and I thought
I can use a pun. She planted the idea.
Yeah. So at this point, like, it's hard to explain. Like, people are like, why did you do that? I was like, well, my ex-wife went vegan, and the whole family just made the decision to either become vegetarian or vegan.
So let's some high level yes or no's. Did you experience a drop off in performance?
No, not.
Did you experience an increase in performance?
Yeah, and actually, like, you know, in 2000,
I'm setting you up to finish the.
Yeah, like in 2017, I outright won the Madison Marathon, and that was like 3 years after going, you know, vegetarian. And my ex-wife was like, "Oh my gosh, like, that's so amazing." She's like, you know, you should wear like a vegan vegetarian like on your singlet. But despite the training loads I mentioned, like, I don't get sore. Like, I run 80 plus miles a week, and I just don't get sore, Jeff. And I think a lot of people talk about this, and I'm not trying to, like, some people that are vegetarian or vegan or try to convince everyone else that they should. I think people should make their own decisions, but like, I don't get sore, and I think there's a lot of, you know, valuable nutrients and minerals in, that people might not get in their diet if they're eating, a meat-based diet. So a lot of plants, and, you know, you're getting a lot of extra minerals and certain
Yeah.
antioxidants, and
Well,
then
instead of hitting the science behind it, I just wanted people to hear that not only did you not have a drop off, but you've had an increase in performance over that.
yeah, not at all. And vegan is a whole different realm. Like that is hard. Like that's a challenge. It's a challenge to eat anywhere. When we race in Europe, like it's hard. Like in Spain, like
So you probably know the joke. How can you tell if somebody's a vegan? The answer is just wait. It's going to come up.
yeah. So vegetarian, it's a lot easier. Like you can eat a margarita pizza almost around the world, and it's okay. You can't do that when you're vegan because you can't eat the cheese, right? So it's hard, and different cultures have different expectations. Like Spain, where we just were, like they're more pescatarian, so they eat fish, right? So they consider fish to be vegetarian. So a lot of their vegetarian dishes still have fish in it, which is a lot of challenges for a vegan when, especially when you're racing and traveling around the world. I'm a vegetarian. I can make it work. So
Sure. Cool. So what do you have next on your short-term list of things you'd like to achieve?
oh gosh, I mean we were chatting before, and I mean, like I said, I went to Duathlon Nationals. First time I went, the next year's the goal was to make the podium. Made the podium a couple times. The goal was to win the thing. Last year, my goal was to win both races, which I did. That was like a challenge, instead of winning one and coming second, is like
Just kind of for everybody listening in, to meet a national champion, although it seems rare, they are relatively common. I don't want to say that in a demeaning sense at all, but to meet somebody who's actually won in two different disciplines, that's sort of the Michael Phelps-esque sort of experience within our sport. There are not many multinational champions, especially multinational champion in a single year people in our whole country. So I know they gave you the title of Masters Duathlete of the Year, but the idea that you win multiple national championships, literally consecutive days, that's ridiculously rare. That's kind of your thumbprint on your identity in the
Yeah,
eyes of a
it
lot
is
of
hard
people.
because like this year I placed second at both events, but the person who beat me in both events, they only did the one race, right? Like the fellow who won the sprint distance just did the sprint and that's it. The person who won the standard and beat me just did that. I was second in both days in both events. So last year I won both races, which I found to be, just a lot of luck and
Yeah, there weren't many of those in our country. I mean, regardless of what sport we're talking, swimming, that generally, the person who wins the 400 free
yeah,
is
and
not
it's
winning
because
the 50 butterfly.
a lot of people specialize and or just focus on one or the other, right? Like it is hard mentally. The first time I did both, it is really hard to think that, like, do you go 90%? Do you go 95%? Do you go 100%? Like how are you going to race the next day
Sure.
when you go to the well on day one? Like that is hard. So last year it was the standard was first and the sprint was second. I think it is easier that way.
Same here. I do too.
This year it was the reverse order. The sprint was day one. The sprints, if you go hard, can take a lot out of you. Like if you're really throwing down
Exactly.
on those runs, while you can still draft in the bike and it's not as hard. It's a shorter race. Mentally, I think it's easier to convince yourself to go hard for an hour on the second day than to go out there and race hard for 2 hours or just under 2 hours on the second day. So the other secret sauce, I will say, if you want a secret sauce or whatever, the other thing I would say that I've been doing, Jeff, my whole life is cross-country skiing. I did it when I was growing up. I did it in college on the side. On the weekends, I was out cross-country skiing. And cross-country skiers have the highest VO2 of any athlete. Them and synchronized swimmers are the highest. It uses your whole body. It's very aerobic. It's not like running. Running, there's impact really, so you can only run so much. Cross-country skiers can really, really train hard. And cycling can too. There's not as much impact with, cycling. Skiing, it's more aerobic because you're using your whole body. Cycling, your whole upper body's not doing a whole lot. So in Colorado here, I cross-country ski all winter. I actually work and teach Nordic skiing at the closest ski resort to Boulder. It's called Eldora Mountain. It's an Icon resort. And Icon, if people aren't familiar, is like Steamboat Springs and Copper, and there's a whole bunch of mountains that are owned by Icon. Eldora is the closest resort, and I teach Nordic ski lessons there every Saturday and Sunday. So I go up and I spend the entire day at the ski resort, and I teach 2 lessons a day, but I also...
So people are going to want to know, do you run your loops in the morning when you do that?
Yeah, and I had to modify my schedule because I'm going to be honest, it takes about an hour and a half to get to the ski resort from my door till I'm at the ski resort. In Colorado, it's a lot of canyons, and the canyons, you're not driving fast, and there's a lot of traffic out here. So I had to modify my schedule. So I have to get up early. Like I'm at the ski resort by 9. So I'm, 7:30, I'm leaving, then an hour and a half commute up. So I have to get up early if I'm going to run before I ski. And I do, but this winter I modified my schedule and I actually run on the treadmill because it's dark at that hour of the morning. So I do my quality hard running Saturdays and Sundays during the winter months. And I do it on the treadmill. Monday through Friday, I'm outside. Saturday and Sunday, I'm on the treadmill. The only reason I'm on the treadmill is because I'm skiing. So I'm going up. I'm going to be at the ski resort from 9 to 5, teaching 2 lessons, and I'm skiing probably upwards of 3 hours on my own. So I generally am working for about 4 hours and I ski for about 3 on my own, just my own training. And I would bike after I get home on the Smart Trainer, but I do lighter days on Saturday and Sunday. So I kind of really load it up and I do more volume Monday through Friday. Like I'll try to have 200 miles in for the week by Friday. So I do some lighter days on Saturday and Sunday. And it's,
everybody listening is probably calling you a beast right now to hear your description of your weekends in the wintertime in Boulder. It's pretty darn epic. Well, I want to thank you so much for doing this because I feel like there's content here. I know you want to add more content, but there's already so much rich content here for the people to digest. And I am sure many people are going to look at you out there next time, seeing you flying down there thinking, holy cow, this guy ran really his whole life and he's running 80 miles a week. Holy cow, that's pretty impressive. Thanks for coming on, Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for listening to this chapter of Threshold Stories, crossing thresholds one story at a time. Be ready to cross more thresholds with me in 2 weeks. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly. You can find me on LinkedIn or on my Facebook page at Jeff Gora Team USA.